The Samantha Parkington doll, originally released in 1986, was one of American Girl's first 3 historical characters. Retired in 2009 and re-released in 2014, Samantha represents the Edwardian era, or the early 1900s. A well-off orphan, she lives with her strict but caring grandmother. Samantha's central series, published between 1986 and 1988, consists of 7 books. 6 follow Samantha, and 1, published in 2004, follows her best friend Nellie. Word of warning, there will be spoilers. In the first book, Meet Samantha. Samantha befriends Nellie O'Malley, the young maid who works next door. At the same time, Grandmary's black seamstress, Jessie, announces her departure, and no one will tell Samantha why. I adored my reread of this book. I felt that for a story set in 1904, it handles racism rather well, with Samantha and Nellie not quite understanding why Jessie had to live on the colored side of town. It was also achingly sweet when Samantha gives her new and greatly beloved doll to Nellie at the end of the book. Soon after the events of the first book, Grandmary helps Nellie's family find work in the neighborhood so the children will no longer have to work in the factory. Thus starts Samantha Learns a Lesson. In this book, there is a really interesting contrast between Samantha and Nellie. Samantha as the big-hearted but sheltered upper-class girl, and Nellie as her working-class Irish counterpart. When Samantha writes a speech touting the benefits of industry, Nellie explains to her how horrible the factory conditions were. Samantha's Surprise, the 3rd book in the series, is probably the least impactful. Samantha's uncle brings Miss Cornelia, a friend of his, over for Christmas, but Samantha is resistant to change. It's a sweet Christmas story, but it doesn't have the same depth as some of the others. Happy Birthday, Samantha discusses the suffragette movement. Though not my favorite in the series, I appreciate how the book presents women's right to vote in a child-friendly format while still remaining historically accurate. The 5th and 6th books are 2 of my favorite. In Samantha Saves the Day, though it does not have a pressing historical topic such as voting rights or child labor, it is very compelling. Samantha finds her late mother's sketchbook and decides to go back to Teardrop Island, a place where she and her parents spent a lot of time in her early childhood, but where her parents died during a storm. For a 65-page book, it really packs a punch and discusses grief in a very child-friendly manner. Changes for Samantha is the book in this series that has always stuck with me. Due to influenza, Nellie and her 2 little sisters are now orphans, but when Nellie is set to go on the orphan train, Samantha smuggles the girls into her uncle's house. I actually didn't know this when I first read these books, but my great-great-grandfather was actually on the orphan train, which is an interesting connection. Though perhaps not historically accurate, Uncle Gard and Aunt Cornelia decide to adopt the 3 girls, even though it was uncommon to adopt outside of your family, especially for upper classes. This leads directly into Nellies Promise. Nellie's sisters, Bridget and Jenny, are acclimating well to an upper-class lifestyle, but Nellie has a hard time going from maid to miss, especially when her uncle shows up and threatens to make her work in the factories again. A lovely bookend to the series, Nellies Promise shows that sometimes we can't escape our past, but we can overcome it. I wish there were more characters of color. Jessie was a big part of the first book, and then she sort of disappeared. That could also be because 3 different authors wrote the series. Susan S. Adler wrote the first 2, Maxine Rose Shore wrote the 3rd, and Valerie Tripp wrote the last 3, as well as Nellies Promise. I also wish that the stories had been slightly more critical of the early 1900s. Even though it criticizes child labor and introduces women's suffrage, the books still look at the early 1900s through rose-tinted glasses, though I guess that can be expected when these characters are marketed as historical characters. I will say that years later, the books did make a great reread.